They caged humanity's last survivor for show. Until he made an impossible friendship with their divine beast, they kept the last human in a cage of light and glass, arranged like an art piece in the heart of an alien museum. From outside, it was a xenological exhibit. From inside, it was just prison. Ronan Cole sat on the edge of the raised sleeping platform and watched the visitors file past. Volatri students, tall and sinuous, their scaled skin reflecting the museum's golden lights, pressed close to the transparent energy barrier with a mixture of awe and disgust. They stared as if he were a dangerous animal from a horror story, instead of a tired 42-year-old who badly needed a good cup of coffee and some quiet. And here, trilled the guide in a smooth, rehearsed tone, we observe the last surviving human. Please note the exposed skin, the fragile skeletal frame, the inefficient bipedal gait. Despite such obvious weaknesses, this species managed to devastate its own world with constant war until our empire intervened. Ronan kept his face blank, breathing evenly. He'd learned long ago that any obvious reaction became part of the show. The guide swept a crested head toward him, emerald scales glimmering. Do not approach the barrier. The specimen is extremely dangerous. Humanity's aggression forced us to perform the cleansing. Nearly the entire species was eliminated for the safety of the galaxy. A young Volatri, eyes wide and violet, raised a tentative hand. Is it sedated, instructor? It looks calm. Yes, the guide said, crest lifting in a little flourish. A constant sedative field keeps it docile. Otherwise, it would attack everything in sight. Their brains are primitive and ruled by violence. Ronan almost laughed. The sedation field was little more than a low-level tranquilizer, enough to make him sluggish if he fought it. He'd long since learned to move slowly, to play dull and submissive when they watched. The reward was fewer restraints, better food, and just enough freedom of motion to keep his body strong. Another student leaned in, palms splayed on the crackling energy wall. Does it understand Imperial Common? It can mimic some words, the guide replied. True understanding is beyond its neural capacity. Be grateful you were born Volatri, and not that. The tour group chuckled and drifted on to the next display case. Some hulking predator from an ice moon that had never learned to stop snarling. When the last tail disappeared around the curve of the gallery, the lights dimmed a fraction. Day hours were nearly over. Ronan exhaled, rolling his shoulders, counting heartbeats. He dropped to the floor and started his routine. Push-ups, slow squats, stretches he disguised as cultural rituals the first week he'd been brought here. The xenologist had eagerly cataloged every movement, annotating his exercise as human physical worship behavior. That misinterpretation had given him cover to stay fit. Let them write their papers. He needed muscle if a chance ever came. The Volatri thought of Earth as a solved problem. 50 years earlier, their fleets had punched through human defenses, glass cities, and called it preventive action. They destroyed billions of lives, then convinced themselves it was mercy. A few humans had been kept in labs and museums for study. One by one, they died under poor care, boredom, despair, or brutal experimentation. Now he was it, the last human alive, as far as the galaxy knew. Night cycle fell over the Grand Museum. The main corridors slid into darkness, while security strips glowed faint red. Guards still patrolled. Cameras still watched. Ronan had mapped their routes in his head 1,000 times, tracing every pattern, every timing gap, every flaw. He lay back on a narrow platform and stared at the ceiling. He remembered blue skies over Colorado, the bitter smell of smoke the day the Volatri ships appeared, the frantic years in the Resistance, the final ambush at Denver that had ended with an energy net closing around him and a sharp sting at the base of his neck. 7 years since that moment. 7 years on display. A low vibration tickled through the floor. Ronan sat up. That was new. The hum built, a deep resonant thrum that made the walls shiver. Somewhere beyond his exhibit, alarms snapped to life, a warbling howl echoing through the galleries. Emergency strobes flashed red against his transparent prison. Ronan moved to the edge of the barrier and peered out. Shadows raced along the distant corridor, security teams running, shouting in high speech, the clipped, formal dialect reserved for elite personnel. Secure Section 7. It breached containment. Activate secondary fields now. Breach containment. Section 7. Ronan's pulse spiked. Section 7 was the restricted wing, where they kept the rarest, most dangerous specimens. The one the staff whispered about more than any other was a creature they called the Velox, a sacred entity captured from the edge of known space. The Volatri treated it like a living relic from their myths, valuable enough to guard with an entire battalion. The floor shuddered again. Lights flickered. With a sizzling pop, the energy cells embedded in the ceiling failed for a heartbeat, plunging the hall into darkness. Then the world changed. The soft, constant hum of his cage vanished. Ronan's skin prickled. He reached out, expecting the familiar sting of the barrier. His fingers met nothing. No resistance. No crackle of power. Just air. He didn't waste time questioning it. In one fluid motion, he slid through the invisible wall that had confined him for years and dropped lightly to the cold museum floor. For a second, vertigo hit him. He'd never stood on this side of the barrier. The world seemed too big, too open. Move. He kept low, slipping into the deeper shadows between pedestals and hollow plaques. He knew where the security cameras were. He'd watched them rotate every day. He threaded through their blind spots, following the polished path toward the service corridors that led to the loading docks. If he could reach a cargo bay, maybe he could stow away on a supply ship. Maybe he could get off-world, away from the empire that had murdered his species and locked him in a glass box like a trophy. The alarms grew louder as he approached the junction leading to the docks. He heard the staccato crackle of energy weapons, then the choked cries of Volatri dying. The scent of scorched metal and ozone hit his nose. He rounded a corner and stopped dead. Bodies lay scattered across the floor. Armored guards in black and silver sprawled like broken dolls. Their iridescent scales were dull now. Smoke curled from shattered weapons. The far wall was scored with glowing claw marks that had chewed through durasteel like foam. And in the middle of the carnage stood a creature that did not belong in any sane world. It was huge, 3 times his height at least, its outline shimmering between solid form and vibrating energy. Its general shape suggested a feline predator. Powerful shoulders, lithe spine, a long, balancing tail, but its flank was veiled in living lightning, tendrils of luminous energy that flowed and coiled like a storm-given flesh. 6 eyes burned along its angular head, arranged in 2 vertical rows, each pair glowing with a different shade of starfire. Those 6 eyes locked onto him. Raw instinct told Ronan to turn and run, to dive behind cover, to do anything except stand there exposed. But another instinct, older and stranger, whispered that flight would be pointless, that a thing like this could cross the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. He made himself stay put. The creature padded forward, each step soundless despite its size. The air buzzed with static where its paws touched the floor, leaving faint luminous prints that faded after a breath. As it drew close, cool, electric air brushed his skin. The world narrowed to those 6 burning eyes. When a voice came, it wasn't sound. It arrived directly in his mind, not in Imperial Common or any human language, but in a pattern of meaning that translated itself without words. "You're also caged." Ronan's throat felt dry. "Not anymore," he said, because his brain needed his mouth to do something. "I was. They call me a specimen." As they called me sacred, the presence answered, the mental tone layered and ancient and oddly calm. Names change. The bars remain. It drifted a tendril of energy through the air, not touching him, merely tasting. In that moment, he felt something sift through his memories like a hand through water. Earth, fire, loss, loneliness, rage, carefully folded and buried to survive. "Your kind is almost gone," the voice observed, not unkindly, merely stating a truth. "Yet you're not broken." Ronan glanced at the bodies on the floor, at the smoldering weapons and ruined walls. "Neither are you." The creature's energy, flared faintly. Behind them, the echo of booted feet and shouted orders rolled closer through the corridors. "The Volatri come," the mind voice noted. "They will rebuild their cages if we allow it." Ronan didn't need telepathy to know the answer to that. "Then we don't allow it. Do you know a way out of this place?" The Velox's eyes brightened, all six focusing with laser intensity. Yes. It turned in one smooth motion and bounded down a side passage, leaving a trail of faintly glowing paw prints. Ronan ran beside it, lungs burning as he pushed his captive-conditioned body to full speed. The creature's presence brushed the edges of his thoughts, guiding him toward blind corners, warning him a fraction of a second before each patrol or security node came into view. Twice they encountered guards. Both times, the Velox didn't bother with claws or teeth. It released a pulse of focused energy that rippled through the air like a silent shockwave. The guards collapsed, alive but unconscious, weapons sizzling in their hands. "You're sparing them," Ronan realized between gasps. "They fear me," the presence replied. "Death would make them martyrs. Fear will make them cautious." They burst at last into the loading bay, a cavernous space lined with docking clamps and cargo racks. At the far end, a small transport rested with its engines cycling, prepped for departure. Between them and that vessel stood two squads of armed Volatri, weapons drawn and crests flaring in alarm. "We must reach that ship," the Velox told him. Ronan took in the number of guns between them and their goal and gave a short, humorless laugh. "We'll be vaporized before we hit the halfway mark. Stay with me." The creature stepped forward into the open. A shimmering shell of energy unfurled from its form, expanding like a transparent bubble. When it touched Ronan, his hair lifted and his skin tingled, but there was no pain, just a strange lightness, as if gravity had turned down. The guards opened fire. Beams of coherent energy streaked across the bay and curved. They hit the field and bent aside, arcing harmlessly away to bury themselves in the walls and ceiling in bursts of melting metal and showering sparks. "Okay," Ronan muttered, running in the shelter of that impossible shield. "That's new." They sprinted together, a man and a living storm. Volatri shouted, scrambling to adjust firing patterns, but every shot curved like water diverted around a rock. A few bolts came close enough that Ronan felt their heat brush past his ears and ribs, but none connected. The ramp of the transport loomed ahead. With one explosive leap, the Velox landed halfway up it, its form vibrating with cage power. Ronan scrambled after it, boots slipping slightly on the smooth alloy. Inside the ship, a lone pilot whirled in his chair, crest flaring as he reached for the alarm rune. A tendril of energy flicked across the cramped cockpit, touching the pilot gently on the forehead. He toppled sideways into his harness, unconscious. Ronan slid into the control seat, heart pounding. The console layout was familiar from years of observation, but he'd never actually flown one of these. Still, he'd had nothing but time and a very good memory. He ran through the pre-launch sequence by feel, fingers dancing over alien glyphs. Engines rose from a purr to a roar. Docking clamps disengaged with a heavy thunk. Outside, the bay filled with frantic shouting as more guards poured in. "Strap in if you can," Ronan warned, gripping the control yoke. "This could get rough." "I do not need straps," the Velox's mind voice said dryly, bracing itself with energy tendrils that sank into the deck. Ronan punched the thrusters. The transport lurched forward, nearly throwing him out of his seat. They smashed through a half-closed containment screen, shards of light scattering like broken glass, and burst into the night sky above the Volatri capital world. For the first time in 7 years, as the stolen ship clawed for the upper atmosphere, Ronan Cole saw a horizon that wasn't bounded by energy bars. He saw the curve of the planet falling away beneath them, its oceans and city lights shrinking as they climbed. Alarms screamed from the console. The planetary defense grid had seen them. "Great," he muttered, watching targeting glyphs lock onto their position. Point defense cannons, missile arrays, all the fun stuff. "We are not as visible as they believe," the Velox said calmly, stepping up beside him in the cramped cockpit. Energy flowed from its body into the ship's systems, making displays flicker and rewrite themselves with strings of data no regular transport should ever access. Ronan stared. "What are you doing?" "Convincing their weapons that we are somewhere else." On the tactical screen, he watched as defense turrets began firing at phantom targets. Ghost echoes painted across the sky. The true position of their little transport slid cleanly through the blind spots. Minutes later, they punched through the last whisper of atmosphere and into space. Stars exploded into clarity around them, cold and brilliant. Ronan's hands trembled on the controls as he engaged the main drive and swung them away from the planet, away from the heart of the Volatri Empire. He looked over at the living storm that had made any of this possible. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't even know what to call you." "Names are for beings who experience themselves as separate," the presence replied. "My kind simply are. But the Volatri once named this manifestation Azrael, after a figure in their oldest myths. You may use that if it helps." "Azrael," Ronan repeated. It fit oddly well. "I'm Ronan Cole, last man in a cage. Former soldier. Occasional idiot. I owe you my life." "You owe me nothing," Azrael replied. "We are both escapees of the same prison. Our paths simply intersected." Ronan looked out at the starfield ahead, at the dark ocean of space that had swallowed his world and his people. "So what now?" he asked. "We escaped the museum, but we're still deep inside their territory. This ship doesn't have the range to get us out of the Empire." Azrael's 6 eyes gleamed, reflecting distant starlight. "Now, Ronan Cole, we stop running blindly and head somewhere the Volatri do not dare to go. Somewhere they have already lost." It reached out with luminous tendrils and entered a sequence of coordinates into the navigation system. An area of space marked on Volatri charts as a prohibited zone, a cursed sector from which no colonization attempt had ever returned. Ronan stared at the pulsing marker on the display. "What's there?" "A boundary," Azrael answered. "A veil hiding something your enemies believe destroyed." "A sanctuary." Ronan's heart stuttered. "You mean humans?" "Hope is dangerous for those who have been caged," the Guardian admitted. "But yes, your kind was not wiped out as completely as the Empire claims." Ronan swallowed hard, eyes burning. "Then set the course," he whispered. "Let's see what's behind the veil." The journey to the boundary took hours, then days, and with each shift of the stars outside, Ronan fought a war inside his own head. Hope kept trying to surface, bright and reckless. He kept shoving it down. The Volatri had taken everything from him once already. He didn't know if he could survive having the promise of his people's survival dangle before him and then snatched away again. Azrael moved like a silent storm throughout the ship, interfacing with systems, reinforcing shielding, adjusting their course by fractions of a degree. Its presence drifted in and out of Ronan's awareness like a tide, never intrusive, always there. He slept in short stretches, haunted by flickering dreams of Earth. His sister laughing in the kitchen, the smell of rain on asphalt, the high, pure blue of summer skies over the Rockies. Then the dreams collapsed into fire, sirens, the thunder of orbital bombardment. On the third night, after another restless half-sleep, the ship's chime woke him with a soft but insistent tone. They were close. Ronan pulled on the plain clothes he'd stolen from a storage locker, much more comfortable than the museum's bland robes, and stumbled into the cockpit. Azrael was already there, its form subdued, eyes fixed on the view outside. Space rippled. There was no other way to describe it. Ahead lay a region where the stars bent and blurred, as if some invisible lens distorted reality. The sensors whined in confused protest, cycling through modes, unable to generate a coherent reading. "That's it," Ronan asked quietly. "A veil between what is seen and what is protected," Azrael confirmed. "The Volatri instruments cannot resolve it. They declared this region cursed when their colonists vanished. They tell stories about vengeful spirits and malignant anomalies. Fear keeps them away. And what actually happened to their colonists? They were redirected," Azrael said, "removed from this volume of space and placed where they could no longer harm the balance. The boundary you see is more than camouflage. It is a filter. Ronan rubbed at the stubble on his jaw, staring into the warped starlight. And behind it, one of many sanctuaries. When your species stood on the brink, we could not save Earth. We arrived too late, but we evacuated as many as we could in the final hours and placed them behind such veils beyond the Empire's sight. Ronan's legs felt suddenly weak. How many? Thousands, Azrael answered. Enough to kindle a future, if given time. Ronan closed his eyes for a moment and gripped the back of the pilot's chair. The wave of feeling that hit him, relief, rage, grief, joy, nearly knocked him over. He breathed through it, slow and steady. Okay, he said at last. Then let's go home, or whatever passes for it now. Prepare yourself, Azrael warned. Passage through the boundary is uncomfortable for physical beings like you. I will shield you as best I can. Energy flared from its form, wrapping around Ronan in a cocoon of shimmering light. His skin tingled, then went slightly numb. The edges of the cockpit blurred, as if he were looking through vibrating glass. Not going to lie, he muttered. This feels extremely weird. Better weird than atomized. Azrael replied dryly. Hold still. The transport nosed toward the distortion. The warped stars ahead seemed to stretch and twist, lines of light pouring around them like water around stone. As they crossed the threshold, reality came apart. For a brief eternity, Ronan existed everywhere and nowhere. He felt his body expand to the size of a galaxy, then collapse to a point smaller than a grain of dust. Time smeared, past and future layered over the present, flickering images of moments that had happened and might one day happen. Azrael's presence held them together like a net. Breathe, the Guardian instructed gently. You are still you. Then, with a lurch that made his stomach flip, everything snapped back. The distortion vanished. Ahead of them hung a star system that had not appeared on any Volatri chart Ronan had ever seen. A yellow sun, several rocky worlds, a band of asteroids like a scar. One of the planets, third from the star, shimmered blue and green, swirled with white clouds. The ship's instruments, suddenly happy again, chirped with clean readings. Atmosphere, breathable. Gravity, Earth-like. Temperature bands, within human tolerance. Ronan drifted forward until his palm pressed the viewport. Is that? We call it Haven, Azrael said. Others know it by other names in other tongues. It was prepared long ago as a refuge, in case species like yours ever needed a place to start again. Ronan's throat tightened. And humans are down there. Now, they were when I last visited 5 of you years ago, Azrael replied. The population had grown to nearly 12,000. Settlements, farms, schools. One of your leaders, Counselor Hayes, has done admirably in guiding them. Ronan swallowed hard. Let's go meet them. As they descended toward the planet, the view grew more detailed. Blue oceans gave way to sprawling continents, then to rivers and forests, then to neat patterns of settlement and agriculture. The main colony sat at the mouth of a river where it met a wide, calm sea. Clusters of buildings with sloped roofs, solar arrays shining on nearby hills, fields spreading in ripples of green and gold. You've been helping them, Ronan realized. Energy tech, environmental systems. We offer knowledge when needed, Azrael said. Not all at once. Technology without wisdom causes the very catastrophes the Volatri fear. Haven must grow carefully. As they broke through the lower cloud layers, alarms pinged softly. Ronan checked the scopes. Looks like we've been noticed. On the ground below, tiny figures scrambled. Some ran to shelters. Others grabbed objects that might be tools or weapons. A small group moved toward an open landing field, forming into a cautious receiving party. They're scared, Ronan murmured. Can't blame them. Unknown ship drops through the sky, and their guardian is nowhere in sight yet. They recognize my signature, Azrael said, but they will be surprised by you. No new humans have arrived since the evacuation. For them, your appearance is a legend come to life. The transport settled on its landing struts with a soft hiss. The engines wound down, leaving a ringing quiet in Ronan's ears. His heart thundered anyway. He stood, palms slick, and glanced at Azrael. "Any last tips?" "Be honest," the Guardian replied. "They have lost enough liars." The hatch cycled open with a groan. Fresh air flooded in, cool and rich and subtly unfamiliar. It smelled like grass and distant salt, and flowers his brain didn't have names for. Ronan stepped out into sunlight. For a second, he froze on the top of the ramp, momentarily blinded by brightness after years under artificial museum glow. When his eyes adjusted, he saw them. Humans. Dozens at first, then hundreds farther back. They were every shade of skin and hair and build. Some had the wiry look of farmers, others the lean lines of engineers and technicians. Children peered from behind adults' legs. Old men and women stood with straight backs, faces lined not by age alone, but by hard years of survival. At the front of the delegation stood a woman in her 50s with close-cropped gray hair and sharp, assessing eyes. She wore simple, functional clothing, but her stance carried authority. A few steps behind her, a younger woman, with the same set to her jaw and the same stubborn light in her eyes, watched Ronan with open curiosity. The older woman's gaze flicked briefly to Azrael, then back to Ronan. "Azrael," she called, voice strong. "You returned sooner than expected, and with company." Azrael padded forward, energy tendrils pulsing gently. "Counselor Hayes," the Guardian projected, its mental voice clearly audible to everyone on the field. "This is Ronan Cole. He was held as a specimen at the heart of the Volatri Empire. He escaped. He is human." A ripple went through the assembled crowd. Shock, hope, fear. Hayes studied him for a long heartbeat. Her eyes traced the faint scars on his arms, the museum-issue clothing still marked with Volatri glyphs, the way he stood balanced on the balls of his feet, ready for anything. "We were told," she said carefully, "that all other humans had been killed in the cleansing, that no one else survived outside Haven." "They told me the opposite," Ronan replied hoarsely, "that you were all gone, that I was the last." He swallowed. Turns out they lied to everyone. A tall, thin man stepped forward at Hayes' gesture, carrying a compact diagnostic device. "Dr. Barrett," she said by way of introduction, "we need to be sure, for our people's sake as much as yours." Ronan lifted his chin and held still as Barrett passed the scanner over him. The device chirped, hummed, displayed data in familiar human alphabet. The doctor's eyebrows shot up. "Baseline human," he said, astonished. "No signs of genetic manipulation. No Volatri implants. Whatever they did to him, they didn't tamper with his DNA." Hayes let out a breath he hadn't realized she'd been holding. She stepped closer, hand trembling slightly, and then, without ceremony, pulled Ronan into a hug. He stiffened, shocked. It had been so long since another human had touched him with anything but clinical detachment. Slowly, he raised his own arms and returned the embrace. "Welcome home, Lieutenant Cole," she said softly near his ear. "You're among your own now." The words hit harder than any blow. Home. For years, home had meant nothing but a burnt planet and fading memories. Now, standing on alien soil with human voices murmuring all around him, it felt like a possible future instead of ghost. Ronan cleared his throat when Hayes stepped back, blinking rapidly to keep tears from spilling. "I'm grateful," he said, voice rough. "Honestly thought I'd die in that glass box." "Most of us thought we'd die on a burning Earth," Hayes answered. "We didn't. We built this instead." She gestured toward the settlement. "Come. You look like you could use a decent meal and a bed that doesn't double as a display platform. We can talk while you eat." As they walked, the crowd parted and closed in again behind them. People stared openly, whispering to each other. A child with bright braids trotted alongside, keeping pace. "Were you really in a museum?" she asked bluntly. "Like an animal?" "Worse," Ronan said. "Animals usually get more respect." A few nearby adults winced, but the girl nodded solemnly, as if that made sense. The settlement was a blend of practicality and quiet beauty. Buildings were constructed from local materials, but reinforced with composite tech. Solar panels and small wind turbines glinted among fruit trees. Gardens overflowed with vegetables and unfamiliar blue-leaf plants that glowed faintly at dusk. A central plaza opened around a circular building that hummed with power, a community hub by the look of it. Inside, the air was warm and smelled like bread. Ronan was guided to a bench at a long table. Bowls and plates appeared in front of him. Thick stew, crusty rolls, slices of purple-fleshed fruit that tasted like a cross between an apple and a berry. He ate slowly at first, savoring every bite. Years of museum rations, nutritionally complete but flavorless, made each taste here feel like a small miracle. Dr. Barrett performed a more thorough exam in a corner of the hall, confirming what the scanner had suggested. Mild malnutrition, some vitamin deficiencies, old injuries well healed. But overall, Ronan was in better condition than most would have expected from a long-term prisoner. "You kept yourself in good shape," Barrett noted, prodding gently at his shoulder muscles. "Didn't have much else to do," Ronan replied. "Their scientists loved watching me do push-ups. Thought it was a religious rite." Barrett snorted. "We'll get you on supplements to fix the deficiencies. Otherwise, you're annoyingly healthy for a man who's been a museum piece." Once the medical checks were done, Counselor Hayes and a handful of other leaders joined Ronan at the table. There was Counselor Blake, broad-shouldered and calm, with the quiet alertness of someone who'd once been military. An older man with silver-streaked hair and thoughtful eyes introduced himself as Chun, head of research. The younger woman Ronan had noticed on the landing field sat beside Hayes. Up close, he could see the resemblance in their expressions. "This is Ira," Hayes said, nodding toward her daughter. "One of our best engineers." Ira offered a small, wry smile. "I design things that don't blow up," she said. "Mostly." Ronan nodded back. "Ronan, I broke out of a heavily guarded alien museum with a walking lightning storm. We all contribute." A ripple of laughter eased some of the tension at the table. "Tell us," Blake said, leaning forward, "everything you can about the Empire as it stands. We have fragments of intel from the day of evacuation and what Azrael has shared, but nothing recent. You've been at the heart of their territory, watching." Ronan wiped his hands on a cloth and took a breath. He talked. He told them about the Volatri capital, the endless propaganda about the cleansing, the way they justified extermination as preventive peacekeeping. He described the fleets he'd glimpsed through the museum's limited viewports, the new ship classes, the expansion of outposts on the frontier. He spoke of overheard conversations between guards and scientists about resource shortages, border skirmishes, and what sounded like rising tensions among different factions of the ruling council. He also told them about the Velox, about Azrael's capture, the Empire's arrogant pride in keeping a sacred beast in chains, and the chaos when that decision backfired. Hayes listened with her jaw clenched, eyes burning. When he finished, the room sat in heavy silence for a moment. "So," Chin said at last, steepling his fingers, "the Empire is stronger than ever, but not without cracks. They've built their dominance on fear and the story that they alone can be trusted with power. If that story breaks, then every species they've subjugated finally has a reason to push back," Blake finished. Hayes rubbed her temples. "We spent these years focused on survival. Food, water, medicine, education. We knew the Volatri were still out there, but the boundary made them feel distant. Now it's clear we can't rely on that forever." "The Volatri aren't satisfied with what they have," Ronan said. "They're already working on tech to see past protections like this boundary. I overheard guards talking about a research project designed to detect anomalous energy veils. They're scared something is hiding from them. They're not entirely wrong." Azrael's voice flowed through their minds like wind over stone. "Their fear is not of what is hidden. It is of what might grow there beyond their control." Hayes looked up at the glowing guardian. "Can you strengthen the boundary?" "To a degree," Azrael admitted. "But there are limits. The Volatri are clever. Given enough time, they will find ways to pierce even the strongest veil if we do nothing." "Then we don't do nothing," Ronan said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "You didn't build all of this just to sit here and wait for them to finally notice. If they're afraid of what humans might become, maybe we should give them a real reason." Ira's eyes sparked. "You're talking about fighting back." I'm talking about preparing, Ronan said. Learning their weaknesses, building ships, forming alliances with other species they've stomped on. The Volatri think they ended us. If we move carefully, we can use that arrogance against them. Blake nodded slowly. A resistance network, starting from a planet they don't even know exists. Chun looked skeptical. We're 12,000 people with limited industry and no war fleet. They have dozens of worlds and an armada. We also have Azrael, Hayes said quietly, and access to a repository of knowledge we've barely touched. Ronan frowned. Repository? Azrael's eyes glowed brighter. Beneath this world's surface lies a library, preserved by my kind. Technologies from thousands of civilizations. We withheld it until now because your species needed time to stabilize without repeating old mistakes. But the balance is shifting. It may be time to open more of that vault. Ronan pictured the Volatri fleets, the massacre of Earth, the cold certainty that they would do the same to any species that dared show potential. We can't outgun them tomorrow, he said, but we can start laying the groundwork. Scouts, intelligence, small ships built for stealth, not battle. If we know where they're weakest, we can hit them where it hurts. Hayes studied him across the table. Are you willing to help lead that effort, Lieutenant Cole? You know the Empire from the inside better than anyone here, and you've already proven you don't break easily. Ronan's first instinct was to refuse. He'd spent 7 years being the object of someone else's narrative. Now, suddenly, people were looking at him like a symbol, a leader, a key piece in a plan that might get them all killed. But he also remembered sitting in that cage, watching Volatri children giggle as they pointed at the last human, completely secure in the lie that his people were gone forever. He remembered thinking, if I ever get another chance, I won't waste it. I'll do it, he said, on one condition. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Name it. That we remember what we're fighting for, Ronan said. Not revenge, not slaughter, not becoming a new empire in different skin. We fight so no species has to live in a cage, literal or otherwise, because someone decided they were too dangerous to be allowed to grow. A slow smile tugged at the corner of Hayes's mouth. I think you'll find we're in agreement. Around the table, heads nodded. Even Chin's skeptical expression softened. Azrael's mind voice brushed Ronan's thoughts with something like approval. Then, it said, let us begin. The days that followed Ronan's arrival on Haven blurred together in a whirlwind of introductions, strategy sessions, and restless thoughts that stole sleep from the rare, quiet hours of the night. Every morning, he woke expecting to find himself back in the museum cage, staring at energy bars and polished floors and the cold eyes of spectators who saw him as a relic. But each time he opened his eyes, he saw sunlight filtering through wooden shutters, smelled unfamiliar flowers on a breeze, and heard human voices murmuring outside his window. Real voices, real people, not recordings played to soothe a captive mind, not alien footsteps echoing across a sterile gallery, but the living pulse of a surviving civilization. Haven felt both alien and achingly familiar. Its sky held a faint lavender tint at dawn, its grass was slightly bluer than Earth's, and its 3 small moons rose in different phases each night. But the people were human in every way that mattered. They worked together, argued passionately during council meetings, told jokes around cook fires, comforted frightened children, and disagreed loudly about how many greenhouses the Western settlement really needed. It was messy and vibrant and alive. Everything the Volatri believed humanity incapable of sustaining. Ronan spent most of his second morning walking through the settlement with Ira Hayes as she explained how Haven had grown since the evacuation. These solar collectors, she said, motioning toward a hill where mirrored panels glinted in the late morning sun, were built using Guardian schematics adapted to local materials. They're more efficient than anything we had on Earth before the fall. We placed them strategically so their energy signatures mimic natural thermal patterns. Azrael made sure of that. Ronan nodded, taking in the neat arrangement of homes, the terrace gardens, the rhythmic movement of people going about their work with practiced confidence. You've built all this in just 15 years. 14, Ira corrected. The early years were rough. A lot of us were still dealing with grief, disorientation, trauma. Some wanted to recreate old cities. Others wanted to live off-grid. Eventually, the council guided us toward a middle path, practical, sustainable, simple enough not to draw attention, but advanced enough to support growth. Ronan admired that human adaptability distilled into a colony unlike anything Earth had seen. "And Azrael checks on you often?" he asked. Ira shrugged. "Often for a cosmic guardian isn't the same as often for us. Sometimes we'd see them twice in a month. Other times they'd vanish for a year. They always return when we need them most." She paused, then added softly, "We didn't know why this time felt different. When Azrael arrived without warning, everyone sensed something had changed." "Then you walked down the ramp." Ronan rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't mean to cause upheaval." "You didn't cause it," Iris said gently. "The Volatri did. You just brought the truth we've all been trying not to think about." That truth hung heavy in the air. The Volatri Empire was still out there, expanding, consuming, and inching closer every year to the technology that could reveal Haven's existence. After their walk, Counselor Hayes summoned Ronan to the council hall. A round building carved into the hillside, its interior lit by natural skylights and embedded luminescent crystals the Guardians had provided. The council members sat in a circle, leaving an open seat for Ronan beside Hayes. "We have a great deal to discuss," she began once everyone settled. "Now that we know the Empire is actively searching for anomalies that may indicate surviving humans, we must accelerate our defensive planning." Shun leaned forward. "We need to understand everything Ronan observed. Every weakness, every faction within the Empire, every bit of tension that can be exploited. The Volatri are powerful, but they are not monolithic." "I can help with that," Ronan said. "I listened more than they realized." Guards complained about supply shortages. Scientists grumbled about political interference. Officers whispered about border unrest. Their empire is stretched thin in places. Blake nodded. "Empires always crack from within before they fall from without. But to act on this information, we need eyes in the field." Hayes gestured toward the holographic projection glimmering above the table. A three-dimensional map of Haven, then the surrounding star systems beyond the boundary. "We believe the time has come to open the Guardian Repository." A ripple of tension passed through the room. Shun spoke up, voice tinged with reverence. "The repository contains technology far beyond anything humanity ever developed. Energy systems, propulsion innovations, defense mechanisms, medical advancements. It's a treasure trove of knowledge collected across millennia. But we've been cautious. Too much too fast could lead us down the same destructive paths as before." Ronan nodded. "I get it. High tech is a double-edged sword. But we don't have the luxury of playing safe anymore. The Volatri are developing boundary detection tech. If they complete it before we're ready." Hayes finished the thought. "Haven burns." Silence fell. Ronan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd watched Earth burn. He wouldn't let happen again. Not to these people. "We start small," he proposed. "Recon ships. Fast, stealthy, built to blend in with Volatri civilian traffic. We gather intelligence. Identify sympathetic species. Find cracks in the Empire's armor. Then we prepare sabotage targets, not open warfare. If we can destabilize their boundary research, stall their expansion, and build alliances, we buy ourselves years." Ira tapped her tablet. "I've already begun drafting prototypes based on Guardian schematics. They aren't warships, but they could outrun anything the Volatri use for patrol routes." Shin added, "And the repository may contain shielding tech that can mask energy signatures almost completely. If we integrate it carefully, we'd have vessels the Volatri literally cannot detect." Blake smiled for the first time that morning. "Then it's settled. We moved to Phase 1. The Council voted unanimously. Phase 1, reconnaissance, stealth, intelligence gathering. The foundation of a resistance network. Over the next weeks, the shipbuilding facility beneath Haven's northern mountains was activated for the first time in centuries. Automated forges roared to life. Holographic schematics flickered on towering screens. Humans trained in engineering, Many with only rudimentary experience from Earth learned to work with advanced alloys and guardian materials that responded almost organically to energy input. Ronan visited the facility daily, watching the first sleek hull take shape. Shimmering dark metal fused with crystalline energy conduits made something warm settle in his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was building something. Most nights, fatigue kept him from sleep, and conversations with Azrael became a steady presence, one he hadn't realized he needed. One night, he found the Guardian perched on a cliff overlooking the sea, its 6 eyes reflecting the starlight dancing on the waves. "You're troubled," Azrael said without turning. Ronan sat beside the enormous creature, letting the cool breeze wash over him. "I keep thinking about the museum, the way they looked at me, like I was an animal, a warning, a punishment. And now I'm sitting on the edge of a plan that might spark a war." Azrael's tendrils pulsed softly. "You fear becoming what they believed you to be." "Yeah," Ronan admitted. "I don't want to lead humanity into another version of what the Volatri already do: dominate, control, destroy." Azrael's mind voice softened. "You misunderstand your role. You are not leading humanity to conquest. You are guiding them back into balance. The Volatri tipped that balance long ago. You are merely restoring what should have been." Ronan stared at the stars. "You make it sound easier than it feels." "It will never be easy," Azrael said. "But your choices are guided by compassion, not fear. That alone distinguishes you from those who burned your world." Ronan let out a slow breath. "I hope you're right." "I am," Azrael replied simply. A month after the council vote, the first ship rolled out of the assembly cradle. They named it the Pathfinder. Polished, stealth-coated, sleek as a blade, it represented the first human vessel designed not for war, not for colonization, but for survival through intelligence. Its energy signature was engineered to mimic background radiation. Its engines whispered rather than roared. Its sensor arrays extended far beyond Volatri standards. Ira ran diagnostics for 14 hours straight without complaint. Ronan conducted tactical simulations until dawn. Blake personally oversaw the selection of the first crew. When the day came for the Pathfinder's maiden mission, the entire settlement gathered on the upper terraces of Haven's cliffs, watching as the ship hummed with contained power. Families held hands. Children lifted one another onto shoulders. Ronan stood at the base of the ramp, uniform freshly cleaned, heart pounding against his ribs with something that felt like pride and fear. Ira approached first, suited in light reconnaissance gear, her brown hair tied back in a braid. "You ready, Commander?" she asked, teasing lightly. "No," Ronan admitted, "but I'm going anyway." "That's good," she said. "Only idiots feel ready for something like this." They boarded the Pathfinder, joined by the remaining 4 crew members, a navigation specialist who had mapped more of Haven's skies than anyone, a communication expert fluent in every Volatri dialect Ronan taught her, a xenobiologist who had studied Volatri physiology secretly for years, and a former Earth Marine who had trained Haven's defense squads. Azrael appeared at the ramp, looming and luminous. "Remember," the Guardian projected, "the Empire will not expect humans beyond the Veil. You're a ghost to them. Move like shadows. Strike only when purpose demands." Ronan nodded. "We'll return in 3 weeks, if all goes well." Azrael's eyes glimmered. "Be safe, Ronan Cole." The ship sealed. Engines flared. The Pathfinder lifted into the lavender sky, leaving a shimmering trail as it ascended. Crossing the boundary again was smoother this time, thanks to Azrael's adjustments. When they emerged, stars unfolded across the void, a quiet ocean waiting. The mission began. For days, they drifted along the Volatri trade routes, gathering data, listening to encrypted channels, observing fleet movements. Ronan's instincts, sharpened by years of captivity, proved vital. He helped the crew avoid a patrol cruiser by ordering a slow drift behind an asteroid cluster. Later, he recognized a high-level diplomatic transmission pattern and decoded fragments that revealed rising tension within the Empire's outer colonies. It wasn't long before they encountered their first close call. A Volatri cruiser slipped out of hyperspace ahead of them, nearly nose to nose. Ronan's stomach dropped. Kill engines, he ordered instantly. Power down everything but life support. Now, the crew obeyed, adrenaline spiking through the cabin. Darkness wrapped the Pathfinder like a shroud. For 6 excruciating minutes, the cruiser scanned the region. If its sensors pierced their stealth field, they were finished. The ship drifted like a dead leaf. Finally, the cruiser veered away, satisfied. Ira exhaled shakily. That was too close. It won't be the last time, Ronan said. But we're learning. By the second week, the Pathfinder had collected enough data to fill Haven's archives. Fleet trajectories, political schisms, scientific advancements, suspicious research projects, including one that made Ronan's blood run cold. The Volatri were testing a new energy detection array, one specifically designed to identify boundary distortions. They're closer than we feared, the xenobiologist whispered while analyzing the data. They're not there yet, but give them a few years. Ronan stared at the display. We don't have a few years. They spent their final days planting long-range monitoring beacons, devices small enough to evade all known sensors, transmitting data back to Haven in encrypted bursts. When the time came to return, the boundary shimmered ahead, but something was wrong. Energy readings spiked. Distortions pulsed irregularly. Something's interfering with the veil, Iris said, scanning rapidly. It's not Volatri tech. The frequency is too organic. Guardian activity, Ronan guessed. Maybe Azrael? Before he could finish the thought, a crimson light rippled across the stars. Another Velox emerged, similar in shape to Azrael, but marked by deep red tendrils of shifting energy. Its presence struck Ronan like a thunderclap, immense, old, and powerful. A voice entered their minds, lower, heavier than Azrael's. I'm Mornith. Azrael sent me. The Volatri are searching in this region with new urgency. I will escort you through the veil safely. Ronan exchanged a wary look with Ira. Do as he says, Ronan ordered the crew. Mornith wrapped the Pathfinder in a protective shroud, then guided them into the boundary. This time, the transition felt smoother but colder, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. When they emerged, Azrael was waiting. Welcome home, Pathfinder, the Guardian said. Your return comes at a critical moment. Hayes and Blake met them on the landing pad. Their faces were grave. What happened? Ronan asked immediately. Hayes answered with a voice tight with urgency. While you were gone, the Volatri stepped closer to finding us. The return to Haven should have been triumphant, a homecoming filled with relief and celebration after the Pathfinder's successful first mission. Instead, the atmosphere was tight with urgency. As Ronan stepped down the ramp, feeling the comforting firmness of Haven's soil beneath his boots, he noticed that the usual quiet hum of the settlement was absent. People moved with purpose, voices lowered, every face turned toward him and his crew with a mixture of hope and fear. Counselor Hayes, Blake, Chun, and several other leaders waited near the landing pad. Azrael hovered beside them. Its luminous tendrils dimmed in a way Ronan hadn't seen before, as if the Cosmic Guardian were conserving energy or bracing for something. Hayes' expression was lined with tension. Ronan, crew of the Pathfinder, come with us immediately. There's a situation. Ira exchanged a look with Ronan as they followed the counselors toward the main hall. I don't like that tone, she murmured. Neither do I, he replied. Inside the council chamber, a projected star map hovered above the table. Several points pulsed in red, volumes of space near the boundary. Chun manipulated controls that zoomed into one of the highlighted regions. These are sensor readings from 2 nights ago, Chun explained. At first, we thought it was a fluctuation caused by atmospheric interference. But then another happened, and another. Ronan frowned. Boundary disturbances? Hayes nodded grimly. Volatri scout ships. 3 of them. They approached closer than they ever have. Ira inhaled sharply. How close? Close enough, Blake said. Within 3 light minutes of the veil. Ronan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. That's dangerously close. Too close for coincidence. It isn't coincidence, Hayes said. Your escape changed things. The Volatri discovered the absence of their sacred beast and their human specimen. They linked the events. They began searching for anomalies, ripples they previously ignored. Your absence has become a political crisis. Azrael's energy tendrils flickered with a troubled rhythm. The Empire's leadership fears what humanity could become if left unchecked. Fear drives them to search for what they erased. Your survival destabilizes their narrative of absolute control. So now they're looking for us, Ronan murmured. Great. Hey, step forward. Based on the Pathfinder's findings, we believe the Volatri Boundary Detection Project has advanced significantly, faster than we anticipated. Ronan's jaw clenched. He remembered the research station, the strange energy readings, the scientists discussing prototype designs. They weren't dabbling anymore. They were racing toward discovery. Ira folded her arms. We're running out of time. Shin nodded. The question is not if they will find Haven. It's when. Blake turned to Ronan. We need a plan, and we need it now. Ronan stepped back from the table, pacing as thoughts slammed into one another. He felt the weight of dozens of eyes watching him, waiting for the man who escaped the Empire's heart to offer a path forward. He drew a slow breath. Then we escalate, he said. We can't rely on hiding anymore. We start Phase 2. The room stilled. Phase 2, the part of the long-term strategy that had been theoretical until now. Hay spoke softly. Alliances and sabotage, Blake added. And outreach, Chun said cautiously. Careful outreach. Ronan nodded. The Volatri are strong because they've isolated their subjects. We change that. We connect the species they've conquered. Create a network. A common cause. We've already identified 3 potential allies. The Orcs, the Talari, and the Mandari. They all have reason to resist. Ira looked toward Azrael. Can the Guardians help us make contact? Azrael's glow softened. We have observed these species for centuries. Some individuals already work against the Empire quietly. We can guide you to them, but the risk is great. Ronan leaned forward. Greater than watching the Volatri wipe out another human civilization? No one argued, and so Phase 2 began. Over the next months, Haven transformed from a peaceful sanctuary into the growing nucleus of a galaxy-spanning resistance. Construction expanded across the northern mountains. New ship designs emerged from the forges, faster, quieter, equipped with Talari communication, threading algorithms, and basic Mandari psychic shielding that Azrael taught their engineers to replicate. Training centers sprang up, turning farmers and artisans into reconnaissance specialists, codebreakers, linguists, and stealth operatives. Nothing about Haven's way of life was abandoned, only fortified. People still raised crops, still taught children in communal classrooms, still walked the beaches at sunset, but woven into everyday life was a shared understanding. Survival, now, required action. Ronan spent his days in constant motion, training recruits, studying Volatri command structures, and guiding Ira and the engineering teams as they tested each new vessel. He spent his nights analyzing intelligence streamed through the monitoring beacons the Pathfinder left behind. Sometimes he found messages from subjugated species desperately trying to hide their resistance. Sometimes he found encrypted transmissions from Volatri, captains arguing over resource shortages or rebellious outer colonies. Each piece of information shaped the growing strategy. And sometimes, in the rare, quiet moments at dusk, he and Ira sat on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, talking about everything except war, her childhood on Haven, his memories of Earth, the fear they shared but rarely admitted. It was during one of these evenings that Iris said softly, I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want to fight for it. With you. Ronan looked at her profile illuminated by fading sunlight. He felt something unfamiliar, a warmth he thought had been burned out of him years ago. You're not alone in that, he said. Haven wasn't just a battlefield in waiting. For the first time since Earth fell, Ronan felt like he belonged somewhere again. Like he was part of a community not defined by captivity or loss, but by determination and stubborn hope. 6 months after Phase 2 began, the Pathfinder embarked on its second major mission. This time not just observing, but initiating contact. The rendezvous point, was an abandoned mining outpost orbiting a gray, frozen moon outside regular patrol routes. Ronan, Ira, and 2 other crew members sat in the cockpit as the outpost drifted into view, a crumbling structure half buried in ice and shadow. A voice crackled over encrypted channels, a voice with a sharp, clicking undertone that matched no human language. Designation: Pathfinder. Identification confirmed. Approach with caution. Ronan's pulse quickened. The Vorks were waiting. Their contact, a brilliant engineer named Zeth, arrived in a protective suit that resembled an intricate exoskeleton. Vork's physiology required pressurized environments outside their homeworld. When he stepped through the airlock, his compound eyes flickered with iridescent colors. Excitement or curiosity, Ronan guessed. Zeth extended a delicate, claw-tipped appendage. Human Ronan Cole, you survived the cleansing. The Empire claims otherwise. Yeah, Ronan said, shaking the offered limb. The Empire lies a lot. Zeth's mandibles clicked, a Vork's laugh. This changes the calculus, Zeth said. The extinction of humanity was the Empire's greatest display of dominance. If humans still live, the Empire's myth of invincibility shatters. That meeting was the first of many. The Talari, an insectoid species with unparalleled communication technology, soon joined the network. Their representatives spoke in strange harmonic frequencies that translated poorly into verbal languages, but their intentions were clear: cooperation. The Mandari, a psychic humanoid species whose telepathic gifts had been twisted by Volatri exploitation, offered early intelligence on high-command internal disputes. Their contact, Selu, appeared delicate and soft-spoken, but her mind was razor-sharp. She delivered the most destructive revelation yet. The Empire is planning something. They call it the Boundary Disruptor, a weapon meant to tear through fields like the one protecting your haven. Ronan felt his breath leave him. How far along? He asked urgently. Early stages, Selu replied, but with accelerated funding and priority clearance. They believe someone escaped. Her eyes locked on Ronan. You. Ronan swallowed hard. Then we moved to Phase 3. No one said it aloud, but they all understood. The time for passive defense was ending. Phase 3 meant striking the Empire before it completed the Boundary Disruptor. A surgical operation, highly targeted, incredibly dangerous. Haven had spent years preparing to avoid detection. Now, they were planning to walk directly into the Volatri Empire's most secure research facility. Ronan met with the Council in a storm of planning sessions that stretched for weeks. Maps, stolen schematics, Mandari psychic readings, and Talari data intercepts filled the table. The facility was deep within Volatri territory, protected by elite soldiers, high-energy shielding, and automated defenses. It was, in short, nearly impossible. But nearly was a word Ronan had learned to respect. It meant it could be done by the right people. One night, Azrael found him alone in the empty council hall, staring at the blueprint of the facility. You doubt your readiness, Azrael observed. I doubt everything, Ronan admitted. This mission could get people killed. People who've lived in peace their whole lives. People who trust me. Azrael's tendrils brushed the floor, glowing faintly. Leadership is never without fear. But understand this, the Volatri will not stop. They cannot tolerate what they perceive as uncontrolled potential. Humanity frightens them. Not for what you are, but for what you might become. Ronan sighed. I'm not trying to conquer the galaxy. No, Azrael said. You are trying to free it. The final decision came 3 months later. The operation would be called Eclipse. A small team, 1 human, 1 Vorks, 1 Mandari, 1 Talari, led by Ronan himself. Azrael would escort them across the boundary and shield them during insertion. The Pathfinder would remain on standby for extraction. Ira wanted to go, argued passionately to join the mission. Ronan refused. You're too valuable here, he insisted. If Eclipse fails, Haven needs you to finish what we started. Ira's jaw clenched, eyes flashing with frustration. You think I can't handle it? I think, Ronan said softly, that I don't want to risk losing you. That stopped her. Something tender flickered across her expression, quickly masked. Then come back, she whispered. Because if you don't, everything we're building collapses. Ronan touched her hand. I'll come back. When the day arrived, Haven held its breath as Eclipse launched. Families gathered on terraces. Children waved flags sewn from scraps of old earth fabrics. Elders whispered prayers in languages nearly forgotten. Azrael, glowing like a living storm, wrapped the small transport in protective energy. Stay close, the Guardian instructed. I will carry you past detection nets. The journey to the facility felt like navigating the edge of a knife. Patrols swept nearby, defense platforms powered with deadly energy. Volatri researchers moved like shadows in their gleaming laboratories below. Inside the facility, Ronan's team moved with precision. Vorix engineering, Manari psychic dampening, Talari signal disruption, and Ronan's intimate knowledge of Volatri infrastructure. They located the boundary disruptor prototype, a towering lattice of energy coils and quantum destabilizers, and planted charges designed to collapse the structure inward. But Ronan didn't just destroy the machine. He hijacked the facility's broadcast array. Signal amplified. Encryption shattered. Transmission sent across every major planet in the Empire. Evidence of the cleansing slice. Footage of human survivors. Proof that the Empire's leaders had manipulated their own people. And undeniable data showing that their sacred beast, the Velox, escaped them. The Empire cracked. Some worlds rebelled instantly. Others hesitated, but doubt had taken root. A storm of political upheaval swept through Volatri space. By the time the charges detonated and the Eclipse team escaped, the Empire's myth of absolute power was already dying. Back on Haven, Iris stood on the landing pad when Ronan returned. He stepped down the ramp, bruised, exhausted, but alive. She ran to him. For the first time in years, Ronan let himself feel the emotion he had buried so deeply. Haven erupted in celebration around them, but the war wasn't over. It had only begun, and humanity was no longer merely surviving. It was rising. The days following Operation Eclipse were unlike anything the galaxy had seen in generations. Across Volatri-controlled systems, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into shouts, and shouts into open dissent. The footage Ronan had broadcast, raw, undeniable proof of Imperial deception, spread faster than the Empire's sensors could suppress. Images of the Sanctuary Project, files exposing High Command's secret agenda, and the revelation that humanity still lived all detonated like synchronized shockwaves. The Volatri Empire had built its power on the myth of perfect authority. Ronan had cracked that myth wide open. On Haven, the mood was a volatile mix of celebration, fear, and determination. Families gathered around projection screens showing intercepted transmissions, Vorix workers refusing orders, Talari councils announcing autonomy, Mandari empaths declaring themselves free agents. Even within Volatri society, factions emerged, some demanding reform, others calling the High Command traitors. Ira and Ronan spent hours reviewing updates from the Resistance Network. Each new message painted the same picture. The galaxy was waking up. But awakening and winning were two different things. The Volatri military, fractured though it was, remained enormous, and the High Command responded with panic. Entire fleets mobilized, governors issued martial crackdowns, and loyalist soldiers were deployed to crush rebellious worlds. The Empire was wounded, but wounded predators could still kill. One afternoon, Ronan and Ira stood in the observation dome overlooking the Western Sea. The waves below crashed against the cliffs as sunlight fractured across the water in dazzling gold. But Ronan's thoughts were firmly on the stars, on the battles unfolding hundreds of light years away. Ira watched him quietly. You've barely slept since we returned. Ronan exhaled slowly. People are dying because of the spark we lit. No, Ira said gently, stepping beside him. People are fighting because of the truth you revealed. The Empire has been killing for centuries. You didn't cause the fire. You pointed out where the fuel was buried. Ronan let that settle for a moment. Still feels heavy. Everything that matters does. He took her hand, grounding himself. Haven's sky glowed with soft colors. Somewhere behind them, children were laughing, unaware of the storm beyond their world. Haven was still safe, and he intended to keep it that way. The council convened daily now. Blake, Hayes, Chun, Ira, Ronan, and Azrael, along with representatives from the Talari, Vorx, and Mandari, gathered around the projection table, mapping the galaxy sector by sector. A Talari envoy, shimmering in iridescent hues, clicked harmonically. Our communication webs spread through 19 systems now. Civilian worlds broadcast your message openly. But military worlds? Blake asked. The envoy dimmed. Less progress. High Command threatens any who question them. Selu, the Mandari liaison, touched her temples. But the High Command is fractured. Their telepaths are divided. Some feel guilt for their role in the cleansing. They are becoming sympathetic. Zeth, the Vorix engineer, tapped a claw on the table. We have redirected manufacturing lines on 2 industrial planets to sabotage Imperial ship production. Output has dropped by 17% already. Chun looked impressed. 17% in 3 weeks? That's remarkable. It is a start, Zeth replied. But their reserves remain vast. Ronan stepped forward. Then we keep pushing. Our goal isn't total conquest. It's destabilization. Enough pressure, enough coordinated resistance, and the Imperial structure collapses under its own weight. Hayes nodded. We're not trying to replace the Volatri. We're trying to free their subjects and force reform. Azrael's 6 eyes gleamed. Balance. All things must return to balance. In the months that followed, Ronan became the de facto coordinator of the Resistance's strategic operations. Ships built on Haven traveled into hostile space, running supply routes, relaying intelligence, and evacuating allies who risked execution. Haven became a hub for encrypted data, diplomatic negotiations, and quiet hopes. And yet, even as the resistance grew, danger crept closer. One night, alarms blared across Haven's main compound. Ronan raced with Ira toward the command center, the halls buzzing with tension. Blake met them at the entrance, face grim. Volatri's scout ship approached the boundary. Ronan's stomach dropped. Did it breach? No, Blake said, but it swept closer than any before, only seconds away from detecting something inconsistent. Azrael intervened. They rushed outside where Azrael hovered above the cliffs, its energy flaring bright and unstable. Mornith, the crimson Velox, hovered nearby, projecting a barrier of shimmering force that rippled like a curtain through space. Azrael's voice sounded strained. The High Command grows desperate. They push their new scanners past design limits. They strain the boundary each attempt. Mornith added, if they continue, the veil will not hold forever. Ronan looked between the Guardians. What do we do? Azrael regarded him with 6 steady eyes. We do what you humans do best. Adapt. Evolve. Move forward before the wall behind you collapses. Ira touched Ronan's arm. We have to accelerate the plan. Hayes joined them, her voice firm. We need a direct negotiation. With a Volatri. With the ones still willing to listen. Ronan blinked. You want to talk to them? Now. They still consider humans an existential threat. That's exactly why we talk, Hayes said. If we don't convince the more moderate factions, the Empire could ignite a civil war that kills billions, including our allies. Shin stepped forward, nervous. And if we fail? Ronan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone understood. Shortly afterward, the Council voted to pursue diplomacy, parallel to the Resistance efforts, not instead of them. The goal: contact a Volatri leader who displayed openness to negotiation. A risky gamble, but one that offered a chance at a peaceful end. Through Mandari telepathic channels, Selu identified a target. High Administrator Valoran, a Volatri political figure known for criticizing the cleansing, though quietly to avoid execution. Ronan, Ira, Selu, and Zeth embarked on a covert diplomatic mission escorted by Azrael and Mornith. Their small vessel, the Horizon Star, slipped through the boundary under Guardian protection, navigating the volatile region between Rebellion and Empire. Valoran's vessel, a silver crescent-shaped ship, met them near a deserted moon. Ronan's heart pounded as they boarded. For the first time in years, he stood in front of Volatri not as a captive, not as a specimen in a cage, but as a representative of humanity. Val-Loren stepped forward. She was tall even for a Volatri, her emerald scales softer in shade than those of the museum guards Ronan remembered. Her crest lowered slightly, a sign of cautious respect. "Ronan Cole," she said slowly, "you survived. The Empire insisted humanity was extinct." Ronan's voice remained steady. "We survived your cleansing. Now we choose to stop hiding." Valoran's eyes flicked toward Azrael. "And the Guardian aids you." Azrael's energy pulsed. "We aid all who seek balance." Val-Loren exhaled sharply. "The High Command is fracturing. Your broadcast divided our people. Some demand negotiations. Others demand extermination. Civil war approaches. That's why we're here," Ronan said. "If the Empire collapses violently, billions die. We want a different outcome." Val-Loren studied him. "You want peace. We want coexistence," Ronan corrected. "We want a galaxy where the Volatri are not rulers, but participants. And humanity? We want to live without being hunted." Silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Val-Loren finally spoke. "There's a way, but it requires dismantling the High Command before the extremists seize control." Selû stepped forward, her telepathic aura glowing faintly. "We can help you. We can amplify the voices calling for change. But you must guarantee amnesty for subjugated species." "And for humanity?" Ronan asked. Val-Loren met his gaze. "Humanity will be recognized as a sovereign species." Ronan felt the weight of centuries shifting. They had an agreement. But peace didn't come instantly. Over the next 18 months, diplomacy and rebellion unfolded side by side. The resistance crippled supply lines, feeding extremist factions. The Mandari sowed dissent through psychic broadcasts. The Orcs sabotaged shipyards. The Talari jammed military communications. And the Volatri reformists, led by Val-Loren, pressured the High Command from within. The fighting was fierce, but coordinated. Slowly, the Empire cracked, not into chaos, but into change. Finally, after years of tension, the Volatri High Command collapsed. Not through assassination or conquest, but through mass resignation under public pressure. The Empire surrendered its authority. A new order emerged, the Galactic Concord, a council representing all species, Volatri, human, Orcs, Talari, Mandari, and many others. Azrael and Mornith attended the first assembly as witnesses, their presence symbolic of a new era. Haven opened its boundaries, no longer needing to hide. Humans walked openly under alien skies. Volatri scientists visited Haven to learn about humanity, not to imprison it. Children grew up knowing dozens of species as friends. 5 years after the Concord's founding, Ronan and Ira stood on an observation platform overlooking Haven's new diplomatic center, a beautiful structure blending human architecture with Guardian influence design. Delegates from across the galaxy passed through its halls. Ira squeezed Ronan's hand. "Did you ever imagine this?" Ronan watched the bustling activity below, Orcs engineers sharing designs with human students, Talari diplomats conversing with Volatri reformists, Mandari empaths guiding mixed-species teams. "No," he admitted. "Back in that cage, all I wanted was to survive another day. This is more than hope. It's proof we weren't what they said we were. It's proof we were always more." Azrael materialized beside them, shimmering in the afternoon light. "The balance has been restored," the Guardian said. "Not through domination, but through understanding." Ronan looked up at the cosmic being that had freed him. "We couldn't have done this without you." Azrael's 6 eyes glowed with something gentle. "It was never about saving humans. It was about saving possibility. Your species embraced its potential. That is your victory." Ronan turned to the horizon, a sky painted with colors Earth never knew. He felt Ira lean into him, her warmth grounding him more than any battlefield or council chamber ever had. Once, he had been the last human in a cage. Now, humanity stood among the stars, not specimens, not fugitives, but equal members of a united galaxy. And Ronan Cole finally understood what freedom truly meant. Not escaping the cage someone built for you, but making sure no one else ever lived in one again.